gentlemen, may I please invite the 5 principals of Studio Lotus, Ambrish Arora, Ankur Choksi, Asha Sairam, Vardhan, and Sidhartha Talwar. Let's have all of you on stage.
I'll put things into a quick context. I have known Lotus Design since it was a 8-9 people practice out of Chaudhary Prem Singh house. I checked today, it's almost 100 people practice out of Chaudhary Prem Singh house still. And the time between when I first met Ambrish and Ankur and today is about 15 years. So, and I have observed the practice off and on through my own interest in contemporary architecture in India, but also through the 3 to 4 chances that I have personally had to have a very detailed conversation with them about practice. And one of them was even recorded, which was at your studio. And that was exactly about a decade back, is what I was trying to see when we did that. And 4 of you were there. And I think you were also there, but you were not on the table, because I think you were an intern then. So, so I want to start with, we have had a chance to kind of briefly block out what we are going to talk about today. But I want to start with the question of bigness of practice. Very few practices in India have the scale that you are at currently with your practice. Even fewer are able to retain the fabric of what they started with. Let's call them like sort of the foundational values or the principles on which the practice was originally initiated. I want to start this conversation by putting it to you. Maybe Asha, you can respond to that. What is it that you can retain, and what is it that you lose when you scale? And how do you make that bargain? You know, how do you decide that, okay, this is important and this is not so much?
So, hello? Can you guys hear me? Okay. So, I don't think we consciously ever decided that we wanted to be a big practice. It was, the growth also happened in a very organic way, because the trajectory that we started experiencing at some point is that if leadership is emerging within the team and then we're not being able to create the opportunity for them to be able to lead a division of the business or whatever they're capable of, then they would take their developed skill and their aspiration, their ambition, and go someplace else. So that's actually what created for us the idea saying that we should maybe grow. And it came not from us having the aspiration to grow, but from people in the team demonstrating that they would like to grow in their practice, but they would like to grow with us. So that's what allowed us to actually get there. So for a long time, even though we were growing, I don't think I was present to the fact that we were growing. I was just like, yeah, so this person is great, they can handle a team, and so they're working. And you know, it sort of grew very organically, and then suddenly one day Harsh told me we're 100 people, and it was a bit of a shock. So because of that, I find that sometimes we're still thinking of the practice like a small practice in some ways. That we still we still work in the way that we were working when we were 25 people, 30 people in some ways, in terms of the detail that we put into something, the attention that we give to something. There's a studio-like approach to work. The things that I feel that you don't anticipate some of the challenges of being this large. I was having this conversation with these guys at some point saying that at some point I knew the name of every person in the studio. Like, I was on a first name basis with every person in the studio. That I cannot honestly say is the case today, because we've gotten large to the point where we're working with certain people and I know them well, and we each have that relationship with the people we're working with, but we don't have that across the breadth of the organization. So there are those personal touches that you sort of lose out on. It's also, I think, sometimes a challenge for us to think about how do we keep the culture of the organization consistent across the entire studio, because we each practice with groups of people, and there are opportunities for us to come together, but then there are that many opportunities where we're also working alone. So how do we keep it such that the people in the studio experience the organization the same way, even though they're working with different? So these are challenges that we're confronted with, and we keep addressing them ongoingly, but it's a constant exercise in trying to find new challenges and find ways to plug them.
I think it's also I think Asha has already touched upon how it happened and somewhat the why of it, but it's also how our view of scale has evolved, because at every stage it has been a conflict for us. And if we guys sit together almost every Monday, and I mean, it's without an agenda, and we look at, okay, what is it we are doing that's working, what is it we are doing that's not working, what is it we need to do differently. And I think scale has always been both a challenge and an opportunity. And we said, okay, this is enough. And the next thing we know, there are 10 more people in the studio. I think the view, and this is personal, I think each one of us has adjusted to it in our own way. My personal experience is that we are up to something as a studio, right? And that's what is overarching, is that purpose of making a difference in the mainstream, right? Of running a mainstream value-driven practice, which every voice that aligns with those set of values should have its own way of interpreting, right? So I think one of our primary aspirations is that the voice should not be the voice of a few. It should not be the principals driving it. It should not be the partners driving it. It should emerge from a framework that addresses larger concerns that we believe need to be addressed. And when that idea begins to scale, that's really rewarding. So for us, the place we are in right now is even the notion of the practice. Does it exist within the walls of the studio? Is it about the 100 people or 200 or 50 or 20? Or is it about the sphere of influence we have amongst our larger network of collaborators, partners, other practitioners, the conversations we are able to seed? The scale is merely, it's an outcome of people being ready to lead, right? So there are many mini studios within the studio, and there's a lot of autonomy. So they do their own hiring, they run their own business, books. We empower them to understand the entrepreneurship side of things. And our role then becomes to be facilitators and custodians of the values. So even today, if you ask us how many are you going to be next year, we don't know, right? So it's not driven, it's an outcome rather than a direction. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it sounds a bit ephemeral and philosophical, but we've, over the last, I think at least a decade, we've seen it as what it will take to scale, like what you're asking, how do we hold that space, and each of us is trying to contribute to that. So we constantly, so there's never a place of where we know what we are up to, like he's pointing at, that we are up to something, but there is always this sense of ambiguity that we are playing with there. And it evolves as we develop our projects, our priorities, and how we take our decisions. And over the last at least 8-10 years, we've started articulating those for people to kind of really get it and start imbibing it and using it. And even today, I mean, in fact, today morning, me and Sid were in a very intense discussion around what do people get from the values that we've created, or what we'll speak about maybe. But whatever we've articulated so far is also something that we are building on. And I think as a collective, we've realized that the potential of the people is what we want to harness, and we are up to something, and we really want to guide that and facilitate that. But yeah, scale has never been something that has come up as a pursuit for us. It's always been what it will take to get there, what will teams and what will people need to get there. So yeah.
You joined the practice as an intern. You, yeah, both of you. Can you tell us a bit about? So there was this discussion before we were going to meet about this idea of open practice, and the open practice enables people to contribute laterally, if not top down or bottom up, in the way that you wish to. Has that been your what is your experience like in this? Because obviously the practice scaled as you were in it, and
so, am I audible? Yeah. Okay. So for me, it has been very different at various stages. Joining as an intern, my experience of what that openness allowed to do is, I remember we were working with this person named Arun Kulu, who used to lead the furniture design aspect at Studio Lotus, and we were just sitting down, and there was just pure joy of exploration of what we can do in a simple gas bank, literally, which will be kept in one corner of a restaurant. And from there, I've seen the practice grown from 30 people to 120 today. So I believe I'm the only person who probably accurately remembers the number. But what openness allows, even between the five of us, there is a sense of approach where we kind of built on the strengths of each other. And what Ankur was referring to during his morning conversation, I was present there, where the dialogue was about how the business is being sustainable and how does the values come in, and what is the approach to kind of address both together. You also asked one question I wanted to attempt on. You said that where do you kind of balance things, and for us, I think the right word is contrast, where there is never an approach where this should subdue versus the other. Values hold us together, but at the same time, everything that we do needs to be sustainable, and we never lose foresight of that. So yeah, that's.
Just to bring it to you, what does it mean when you say sustainable?
Actually, today again in the morning we were having a chat, and we had a very intense discussion in the morning, and we just realized that whatever we were doing, we were working 60-65 hours a week, and all of that, and that's not really the way we are looking at future of our practice. But definitely for us, or for me, if I look sustainability in the context of the practice, then definitely I think it's the processes and the systems and the operation we need to create which makes our working sustainable. So what I mean by that is that, and we've not really come from let's say, from having working at some very large practices. We've created our own ways of working. But for the future way of working, when we have a practice of 100 people now, like it's very important to get the right balance of how you can work sustainably, how you can really, for example, complete, it's very basic, complete work on time. Like how can you really monitor your outputs, your deliveries? Like how you can really say that, okay, these many allocated hours, you've been able to create your next, you've created your deliveries. So for us, I think the shift is purely towards that how we can create a discipline of our processes, of our systems, our outputs in a more sustainable way where we can really basically actually create a work-life balance. Like how can we say that, okay, our work is completed on a particular time and to us or for future, like we're going home, for example. So when it comes into context of that as a practice, that's where, for me at least, the dialogue or the conversation remains.
Would you like to also respond to that, Ambrish? Because that's something that we have briefly talked about.
So sustainability of the practice, or sustainability, a perspective on sustainability.
So in the context in which he mentioned.
So one of the things, at least the conversations that we are currently having is, what is the practice in the absence of the 5 people currently on the stage, right? My personal agenda, and I think our collective agenda as founders, has been to make ourselves dispensable. And if we are not there, then what does the practice stand for? And it's definitely not shareholder value, it's definitely, I mean, while sustainability of finance is important as a business, as most practitioners here know, but is that our driving force? No, we were very clear. There is a certain intensity we all have as a studio. So what we noticed was that larger practices kind of I have a slightly different perspective, I mean, and that's interesting in our conversations, is where do you draw the line on systems and processes? Because they also tend to standardize. So we are very clear we don't want to standardize, yet we need to harmonize. So what is that thin line? So I think what we are grappling with currently is what is required to sustain, whether it's the structuring of the company, the organization, how does it get seeded, decision making, how do we make decisions as a studio, what are the design directions and design values we follow, how do they get manifested in projects, because again, we don't want our work to look consistent, we want it to represent consistent values, not, so diversity has been really, really important to us. So I think what sustainability means to us is how do all of these begin to have a life of their own beyond the perception of so-called leadership in its traditional sense of the word, and how does that get seeded across the organization where each person in the studio is empowered to contribute, take ownership and authorship at every step of the way, and that's a constant pursuit. Sometimes we fail, sometimes we succeed, but that's a pursuit.
So I'll before we open out, I'll just take you up on that question of authorship, because you mentioned it. In a 120 people practice, how does somebody feel that they are contributing? How does one feel that they are contributing in a 120 people practice? Let's say I'm the 120th person who has joined Lotus. How do I know what I'm doing? What is my contribution to the practice?
It's been a while since I've thought of it from that person's perspective. See, the thing is that your contribution is whatever you bring of yourself to the table and to the conversation. So one of the things that I'm very clear about is that if you're in a room and we're in the middle of a discussion, you are expected to have an opinion. Like, you can't just be the person saying, I'm learning and I'm taking notes. Yes, you're learning, and that's okay. And you might have questions that are not, that may seem really elementary. And you may have a point of view that may or may not make sense, or may or may not adhere to the laws of physics, but that's okay. You're expected to contribute at least your inquiry, whatever your question is. So, to me, the fact that that exists as a culture allows every person's voice to be heard. And what ends up surprising me through that exercise is that sometimes the nugget of an idea can come from anywhere. It comes from any inspiration. It comes from someone with the least amount of experience. It could come from someone who has nothing to do with the project but has just walked across into a design discussion and said something because they've responded to a visual. And it becomes the seed of something much larger. So the acknowledgement of the fact that that space exists and that the project is not my project or his project or his project, it is a collective project. Like, you can ask me questions about any of the projects in the studio. I haven't worked on all of them. There are some that I have knowledge of. There are some that I don't. And I'll tell you what I know, and then when I don't know, I'll redirect you saying, he was the guy, or he was the guy, like, you know, if you have. So the notion of ownership, authorship, credit, acknowledgement, through the practice and through working in the studio, that really sort of breaks down in terms of how you understand it traditionally, and how we as an organization experience it and like to acknowledge it and share it with the teams. So I think if you're the 120th person, the first exercise in doing that, so like sort of breaking that down for them, and then you get it. I hope you get it.
Two things I can talk on this. One is probably what Asha touched upon. Actually, it's not as if that one of us makes a master sketch or the thought and then it gets manifested. I think we don't actually do that. It comes out of series of discussions between us, our teams, and in fact, even the juniors of the team. So, as a person joining has enough access and transparency to have a discussion, to put his point of view forward, and I think they sit in every meeting. So for example, they have access to clients' interaction. So even a junior person would have access to sitting actually on a table around us, within us, to be listening to what is happening, what the brief is, how are things shaping up. So they really understand what's happening in the project. It's not as if that they're just told to do that. So yes, a certain amount of time goes into it, but that time is given for even a young trainee or a young joinee to get how the projects are shaping up. The other point I've forgotten.
We can take questions from the audience if there are any, and then or continue. Is there somebody who can pass the mic? You can take mine.
I just wanted to add on to what was being discussed, because during the first week when I had joined at Lotus, we had an orientation where Ambrish sir and the entire new batch was there, and the first question that sir asked was, what will you bring to the table? I still remember that question because I never knew that I had the capacity to actually bring something to such a large studio. So even making one feel that somebody can actually take charge of even the smallest part, and being a smaller part, they can make a huge impact. So I mean, they came from a different perspective, but being there for a brief moment, I felt like I had charge, I had access, and I could create a change. So was just adding on to,
Introduce yourself. They don't know it. Introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, I'm Pranvi, and I've been a part of Lotus during 2022. I worked there on a couple of projects, and I have had great leads, mostly women. And I mean, whatever values that I imbibe are still from my roots. Thank you.
And what do you do now?
I have my own practice named as the Melange Studio. Yes, yes.
Anyone else? Is there somebody who can help me out, because I can't? Okay.
Hi sir. Hi ma'am. Myself Sunish Sripala Sethi. I'm an architecture student. So what is 5 advices from you people, being the star architects, 5 advices to the student community of architecture?
He asked what is your advice for the students, but he also used the word star architects.
Do you want to know how many architects are on the stage? Like, literally architects.
Sorry sir?
Hello, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hello? Can you hear me now? Okay. Do you know how many architects are on the stage?
Honestly, no.
So by education, or let's say if a degree qualifies for it, Sidhartha is an architect, I am an architect, I don't practice architecture. Asha is a star designer, but she did, her education background is in communication design, graphic design, self-taught. Thank you for calling us architects, because that is something, there is a big joke around it. Coming back to your question, at least my personal advice, and other people can speak for themselves, would be what I've seen lately is that many people kind of try to, very early on in their career, try to choose a certain direction. In absence of having done enough exploration on what really resonates with themselves. So my one advice would be to, at early stage, as much as possible, try your hands in different things, really engage with it, and truly understand what is working for you in the process. Yeah.
Okay, so I would say there are 2 things that I would give as advice to students of architecture. The first is that you're at the beginning of your journey. Ask lots of questions. When you're deciding who you want to practice with, like, have a point of view as to why you're choosing to practice with them. I find that different organizations, different firms, different studios, they all are like little mini families that you're going to go become a part of. And some fit and some don't fit, and that's okay. And everyone's going to find their place in the world where they fit. But unless you're sort of willing to go through that exercise where you're being honest about what you want out of it and what you're seeking from the other person, you're never going to get there faster. So that would be my first piece of advice, saying that when you're out there looking for where you want to work, just have that perspective professionally. The other thing which I would say to everyone is it's always better to ask for forgiveness than for permission. So, like, take a few risks that way.
Is there anybody else?
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I don't know how much advice you signed up for, but there are 5 of us here. It's an overdose, but I've got the least hair on amongst them, so I can. So I believe there are 2 things that will hold you in good stead. It's a practice that I use till today, and I think it's given me clarity on what I'm up to next. I ask myself every few months as to why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I practicing? Yeah. And sometimes the reasons that I find today are actually very different from when I started off, and it helps me recalibrate, re-articulate, and kind of move to a different direction of what is important and meaningful to me at that point in time. So I think what all of us don't do enough is reflect and ask ourselves every few months, I've got it on my calendar every 3 months, why am I doing what I'm doing? I think the second piece of advice is, once you have clarity, then give it all you've got, right? Work-life balance is a conversation that comes into play when work and life are different. Right? When your why is clear and you're driven, then it's seamless. So after that, then you will stop seeking work-life balance because you will be in the flow. And that's when you excel, that's when you are moving, that's when you feel you're moving towards whatever you believe you want to create. So I would say very often that question comes up when you're not clear as to what you're up to. It could be something really mundane, but it has to resonate with your purpose. So I would say that's a critical aspect. Yeah.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
Hi, this is Anup Gupte from Udaipur. I heard you say about values and how the practice will stay when you're not there. So I would like to hear on how you will do that, as in, because most practices all around the big practices, maybe the boss is someplace else and they have multiple practices working, but still they have that value created in their projects. How will you ensure that? That is a question I have always had as an architect. How the next person will have those values which I am thinking when I am starting as a practice.
Yeah, no, I'll give it a shot, then you can talk about it. So, yeah, I think that is what I was speaking about in the first part, where we've been building on that conversation around values, what they mean to us, and how they look in real life for people. So, but we've been building the belief system, and we believe in this approach to have a belief system to align ourselves. So, from that perspective, values are right now things that we've created as a collaborative kind of act at the leadership level, and that's been the starting point. And we constantly engage with the next set of leadership, the next set of people, the larger team, as they keep coming into the organization and keep bringing this conversation on the table. So it's not something that we've frozen in time. It's something that, like Ambrish was saying, we are constantly re-articulating it. So if it doesn't inform our process, then we're going to shape it in a way that it gives us the pathway that we are seeking, using it as a tool. So values for us are more a set of principles that we've built, and we constantly keep rephrasing it. The language is something we've tweaked it many times, and we probably will tweak it further down. But at the core, it all started with an intuition. So for the longest time, I think when we were 3 of us, there was an intuitive sense of taking decisions, and we realized, how does that translate, or how does that get understood by everybody on the ground? And as we grew, it was becoming more and more difficult. So we started by articulating some of the aspects of what has brought us success as a practice. And then also there have been pursuits of inquiries that I think we've picked up in our projects very knowingly, unknowingly, but we've become present to it over the time, which we've now called them out as, pursuits of, as a design practitioner, what are we pursuing? And we've call them our design framework, which informs our design process. It allows for the team to look at how we are breaking up the brief, recreating the brief, working with the client to articulate the brief in a powerful way so that it moves us closer to the project's outcome. So, yeah, so these are, for us, these are more like tools that, go ahead, jump in.
But I don't think you've answered the question. His question is not how did we arrive at our values, how is it that we visualize that without us there will these values get taken forward? I mean that part.
Sorry.
And I
no,
think
so I started by...
And also I think how do you communicate something like that?
Yeah, no, so what I meant was that it is a how that we are yet grappling with. We are trying out various things. So one of the things is we've created a lot of forums for all of us to have conversations by which people understand the values and inculcate them and start using them. But there is, there is no clear process or direction that we have at the moment. And Sid, yeah, okay. You want?
I think what is really undervalued is just the sheer value of alignment. And when you are working in such complex environment where there are projects with their own briefs, with sites, there are so many contextual regions we work with. There are people, what is their interpretation of design? Design, when it goes to expression and aesthetics, that becomes highly, highly subjective. And even the way the practice has grown, Studio Lotus, of course we have reflected upon the questions that we are kind of grappling with. And there is a certain framework that Ankur was speaking about that we have been articulating. Having said that, in the simplest form, constantly aligning each other, keeping that dialogue present, asking questions to each other, like what Ambrish referred to, asking very simple questions, and always staying in that state of inquiry. What am I doing and why am I doing this? And what is informing our decisions is one of the way the volumes kind of is taking shape. People who are joining the firm, they kind of grapple with what do we mean by that. There is so much thinking that goes behind those values and even shaping them. And yeah, just constantly aligning.
Sorry, I just wanted to point out, because we're all saying values and it tends to sound very esoteric. So the thing is that there are actually 9 values that we sat and wrote down at some point. Like, and they're there, they're on our website, they're like printed around the studio, like you can go and see it. Like, so the easiest access is just to be able to articulate it. Beyond that, it comes through just practice. Each of us are willing to be held accountable to it. We all exist and ensure that we are working with those values constantly. And when one of us is not, we are okay with anybody calling it out to us, saying that what you've just said or what you've just done doesn't line up to our values. So simply by living it and demonstrating it, the people that we work with see it, and that's how we hope that it will carry through and everyone will find their own interpretation of it, just like we have. So
probably to answer it more simply, actually I would say a lot of time, like we spend a lot of time in working on leadership, alignment, values, which technically means that we are taking away that time from, let's say, hardcore production, hardcore revenue generation. So I would put it this way, I think almost 30% of our time, in their own way, a lot of our time goes into building teams, having conversations on how to make the process better, how our next layer in leadership are more and more exposed, are in control of the project, how are we not actually, we not even coming for important meetings, so stuff like that. So a lot of time goes into building that robustness, and we are not, and that time is taking away from actually those 8 to 10 hours of the day. So that is where I feel a lot of dialogue and a lot of conversations happen.
And you know, typically like in a design discussion, so there are 4 people, so I'll paint you a picture, and there's a discussion on, say, a layout, or a decision for a detail, or whatever it might be. What we have been very consciously trying to avoid is the conversation being led by hierarchy or saying, I like this. That is a trap, right? I mean, that I like it kind of does not warrant any discussion. Okay, who likes it? Is the person more senior, so he likes it, so that's fine? Or if the junior doesn't like it, so that's not fine? And can we actually go beyond that? So what we are encouraging is a conversation around what about it do you like, and then we have, like everyone mentioned, a framework of design values, frugality, localization, so on and so forth, and we've defined each of these values. So when you have a design conversation, you are able to have a conversation around a certain objective which is beyond the seniority of a person in a room, and you can challenge a decision based on your own interpretation of whether this does the job from either a sustainability perspective, user experience perspective, localization perspective, frugality, detail, or so on and so forth. So that's what it looks like on the ground. So people are able to take ownership of that value irrespective of where they are in the hierarchy of things.
So as we now conclude, I wanted to draw from something you said and then put it out there for all of you to respond to. Till now we have been discussing the practice from the perspective of the 5 of you being sort of in a leadership role in some sense. But what is it that you individually seek out of the practice? What do you seek from the practice? Now you have reached, you said a point that where you are thinking of the practice without you, which means that there would be a point where you would think that this is not what I seek from Lotus anymore, or what is it for you now in this year from that you expect from Lotus Design? Starting from you, it's something that you said.
So my wife is sitting here, and we've been talking about this. So I want to be at a point, and I am nearly there where I seek nothing. I don't believe Lotus is mine, and it has a life of its own, and I had a role to play, and while I played that role, I'm very grateful for what I got back. My hope is that I'm not attached to my identity as being intrinsically linked to Lotuses, and tomorrow if I want to kind of pursue something which may or may not be linked to design, I would do so without being attached to the idea that Lotus needs to be something for me. I would of course be extremely excited and to see what life it takes, and if it continues to be a practice operated or that stands, that's value driven, right? And I just feel that in the times we are in, that's a diminishing kind of scenario, and that is the only, it's not something I seek, but that's the only dream, hope, whatever I would have from a distance. Yeah, so that's where I'm at a cusp right now personally, so that's where I would like to be.
So for me, I think personally, it's always been a space where I've been really able to do the best and pull the best out of myself. It's given me a great sense of joy on the journey. And today, as having contributed to having gotten this wherever it has gotten to, it is still something that I look up to, that it flourishes and grows. So yeah, I mean, that's where it is for me. And I would really, from that perspective, I still have dreams around it.
So they're clearly more evolved people than I am. But I never thought of in terms of what I seek from Lotus. What I look forward to is, funnily enough, has nothing to do with design. It has to do with the people. Like, I really enjoy coming into work. I really enjoy the company of the people, these guys, the team that I'm working with, the energy that gives me, the sense of collaboration and fulfillment that gives me. That's very rewarding. And to me, the thing that I'm constantly seeking is that joy and that energy that comes with that. Now, if the output of that is architecture and interiors, great. But if tomorrow the output of that is that we're flipping burgers at a restaurant, that's also fine. Like, it's more that spirit that I really seek from Lotus.
I think I'll build on what Ambrish said, and personally I get that feeling every day, that we are at the cusp of reaching somewhere, but at the same time we haven't. And because we are speaking from the lens of practice and what I see personally, I think the experience that people create, everybody, I mean, we five are sitting on the stage, but there are so many people sitting out there. What they are also contributing to the studio, where they always keep us on the edge. And personally, me, even if I'm walking down the hall, somebody will definitely ask me, have you thought of that? And I was like, no, I haven't. So that experience that is constantly there, that we are up to something, I think that's perfect. That's what I see.
I think we've all discussed, we've created a set of values, and that has come over our past experiences. And I feel Studio Lotus, one is to manifest these values for the next layer, for the next generation. So it has to live up to those values, manifesting them into what we are up to. I think we this Studio Lotus is a good platform, a good network for collaborations, for conversations, and I think there are further possibilities where, since this body of work and a body of people have come together, the big possibilities I see where it can do much larger, interesting ideas, interesting projects, and whether it's connected to design, it is connected to anything else. I think it's a good network for larger collaborations, I feel, and that is something I feel it should do, in fact.
I think we have run out of time. Thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. If there's anything, last thoughts before we close?
Just wanted to thank you, Ruturaj, for doing this with us. I remember 15 years ago, we had a similar conversation within the walls of the studio, and you wrote a piece, and I think it's nice to see that that time there were 3 principals and now there are 5, and hopefully the next time there'll be some new faces instead of some of us. So, yeah.
When I had come down to the studio for that conversation, you had committed that when my office is 8 to 10 people, you will do that for me. I'll take you up on that.
So, with you on that.